Hello and welcome to IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live and interactive news conversation web TV. I'm Prachi Jatanya. President Pranab Mukherjee's interesting joint address to both houses of parliament on Monday stirred up quite an uproar and a lot of debate between the opposition and the BJP-led government. It'll be interesting in the days ahead to see. We'll try and actually dissect what really happened and how different was President Mukherjee's address this time around compared to what we had in the past in 2009 in the UPA2 led President Pratibha Patil's speech. We'll go and give some graphics, and to give us an interesting take and perspective on this, we have in the studio joining us at the conversation Mr. Sanjay Singh, political editor of sports.com, and Mr. Vinod Sharma, senior journalist. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here at India Post Live. We will also have joining us on Skype and Google Hangout Mr. Sanjeev Singh from Lucknow, who is the national co-convener of the BJP IT cell, and Mr. Kanhaiya Bhelari, contributing editor with Governance Now. Thank you, both of you. We'll come to you very soon. Mr. Sharma, first to you. What were your thoughts about the President Pranab Mukherjee's address? How different, or what is your take on it?
Well, barring a couple of points, these addresses to the joint session by the President, who speaks the lines penned by the government. The President himself has no contribution to this. He merely reads out whatever is provided to him by the government, because governments, as per our constitution, are run by under the seal of the President, and President is an integral part of Parliament. The two houses and the President, they constitute the Parliament of India. So I think that this was it's a ritual which is carried out, and political parties normally tend to transform their manifestos with which they go to elections into the presidential address. And in that limited sense, I think that this was a declaration of intent, which is an improvement from the promise, which is the manifesto. And the schemes that were announced were broadly, we have heard about them in the past, with one or two exceptions, namely the government's intent to raise the FDI in defense production from 26% to some other point, and also their intent to resettle the Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir, which is a very noble thought. It would require some minute planning and some strong security measures, and they'll have to guard against what was pointed out by Mr. Sitaram Yechury, who delivered, I think, a monumental speech in Rajya Sabha. I heard it, every word of it. It was a monumental speech with all the historicity that is required, and he cautioned the government that the use of the word settlement sort of reminds him of what we hear vis-a-vis Palestine, because there are settlements there which have been prompted by the Israeli government, and no such situation should arise in our Kashmir, which I think is insofar as we are concerned as a non-denominational secular state, it is an integral part of India. And in that limited sense, I think that the government will have to be a little cautious on this whole Kashmiri Pandit question, though it is a very noble thought and needs to be pursued immediately. Similarly, on it will be not a youth, it will be a youth-led government. So then there were questions asked as to how will they turn it into a youth-led government rather than a government for the youth. And similarly, there were a whole lot of other things like working towards the goal of a skilled India, which is again a very good idea, a skilled India. So I think that broadly we had a joint address on which we had a robust debate in both houses. That is the happy part of it.
Mr. Singh, the Congress, of course, ripped into that address and what proceeded afterwards, but they called it was high on rhetoric with no clear roadmap being spelled out. Would you agree?
That again is a rhetoric. But then that besides the point. The fact remains that presidential address, as Vinodji pointed out, is given by the government of the day to the president. In this case, if you analyze 55-minute speech of Pranab Mukherjee, it has incorporated all parts what Modi has been saying pre-campaign, also in the manifesto, and after he came into power at the center. which essentially means that somebody apart from giving inputs, various ministry of course had given inputs, but all those points which Modi said had been incorporated in that particular speech. Also, 4Ts, 3Ds,
Yes.
3As and all those stuff, and
Modi
Ek
classic
Bharat
words.
and Shresth Bharat, all those stuff was of course there. But from popular perspective, I think three issues, or broadly perhaps more, stand out in the sense people actually wanted to hear what was the government wanting to say on price rise,
Right.
number one. Secondly, since youth was a new and very kind of enthusiastic constituency for this new government, what was the government and presidential address contained for youth? And also, if you look at it to other sections of society, particularly minorities. In this case, one full paragraph and devoted to minorities, which contained parts and also separately said zero tolerance towards crime against women and riots and so on. That I think is a good beginning, because a section of among minorities were apprehensive and looking forward as to how the government and governance unfolds. That part is there. Then Krisi and
But just to interrupt you, Mr. Singh, how different do you think it was compared to the 2009 speech by President Pratibha Patil? We've seen Pranab Mukherjee saying "my government." It just, the kind of irony came across when he spoke on behalf of the BJP-led government. What are your thoughts on that?
That irony could be there as if you look at Pranab Mukherjee as an individual, but then he is President of India. He has to say "my government," this is his government. Of course, in certain parts, the government also, there was criticism about financial management of previous government, of which Pranab Mukherjee was part.
Exactly.
But then Pranab Mukherjee is there as President of India. That's a bipartisan position, and therefore, what was written by the government, he was essentially spelling it out. In contrast with Pratibha Patil, a stature and personality of Pranab Mukherjee and Pratibha Patil are different. Of
Right.
course, both read out the speeches given by government of the day. But then 2009 was continuation of 2004 government. And expectation, the speech per se was not so much looked up by people as to what Pratibha Patil was saying. In this case, this government had come anew on a fresh mandate and hopes and aspirations towards this government, and people actually wanted to listen to every word as to what was being said there.
Right. Here, Sanjeev Singh, if you can just also throw some light on what is your take compared, in terms of the contrast in the speeches made by President Pratibha Patil back then in 2009 and this time around.
See, firstly, I'd like to clarify the Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat is not a rhetoric. That's a mission statement. It reflects the ideology which we follow, number one. Number two, if you look at the current presidential address, it has been the most comprehensive with clear, concrete steps highlighting action-based agenda of our government. Now, every segment has been covered. If you look at the old, slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan was added by Atalji. Now we have included Makan, Dukan, Saman, Samman, Swabhiman, everything has been incorporated in this presidential address. As Vinodji was saying, it is a clear-cut reflection of what we have committed to electorate in our election manifesto. It clearly goes to prove that what we have committed, we are fully committed to implement whatever we have promised in our election manifesto. And a lot of salient points which are there. If you look at power, we are focusing on a judicious mix of conventional and non-conventional energy resources both. There will be a specific focus on solar. I'll just cite a simple example, like US and Australia, which get far lesser days of sunlight in a year, have got clear policies where you can install rooftop solar panels which are connected to grid. So apart from fulfilling your own house's electricity requirement, you can provide surplus electricity generated through this into the grid. So that can go a long way in solving problem, because most of our problem come during the summer period.
Summers.
That is when the efficiency of solar panels would be the highest. So it is about focusing on such small things which are there, which everybody knew, but are focused. And critics may, fault Narendra Modi on a number of things, but nobody has ever faulted him on his record of executing things. Whatever he says, he means it, he executes it.
Right. I'll just bring in Mr. Sharma here, but if we look at the foreign policy bit of the entire address, the speech seemed to be silent on, relations with Middle East and also West Asia, whereas President Patil's speech clearly had, a couple of sentences. It did make a mention about strengthening those ties with West Asia and Middle East. Mr. Sharma.
No, first of all, I'd like to say that, it's very, very unfair to measure the stature of two people who occupy the office of the president. They have to be treated as equal as presidents, and in that limited sense, I disagree with my friend Sanjay when he says that there's a difference of stature between Pranab Mukherjee and Pratibha Patil.
Two different
Personalities.
I didn't say two.
But I don't think these comparisons, these are very odious comparisons. We should avoid these comparisons.
I never said about stature. I said
anyway,
two different personalities.
we can discuss that later. I think that you see, the foreign policy is one area where the BJP, unfortunately, is tending to gain an inch and show a mile ever since the swearing-in ceremony of the Prime Minister. As was pointed out in the Rajya Sabha, that this is not the first time that head of a state or a government from one SAARC country has gone to another SAARC country to attend the swearing-in ceremony. In fact, it was pointed out that Nawaz Sharif himself had invited Manmohan Singh, who didn't go himself but nominated an envoy to attend the ceremony of Nawaz Sharif. But I think that given the belligerence and the Pakistan centricity of the campaign, it was a good idea on Modi's part to move ahead, rather than be caught in his own rhetoric. And I think having done it as one first step, he has solved many things, made some things easier in order to an outreach to Pakistan, which is a difficult ally, which is a difficult neighbor. And a difficult fellow member in the SAARC Committee of Nations. I was quite surprised to see total absence of any reference to the multilateral fora where India has been playing historically an important role, barring SAARC. And we have BRICS is there, this is ASEAN is there. In all these countries, we are playing an important role. And I wanted some clarity also on how does our new Prime Minister intend pursuing relations with China, and while befriending Japan and United States.
Right.
I mean, there are huge contradictions between Japan and China insofar as the South China Sea is concerned, the reserves there are concerned. United States is engaging with China and seeks to do on equal terms. So what are going to be the terms of engagement with China? As was pointed out, that we are so enthusiastic about the Chinese model of economy. I mean, at least the scale of it.
Yes.
And it was pointed out that the telecom companies, they are all run by the public sector, not one by the private sector in China. So China has been able to dictate terms to the world and to multilateral corporations on the strength of its economy, on the strength of the number of its people who are consumers, potential consumers with a buying capacity.
Let's get Mr. Sanjeev Singh's take on this.
Our focus has been, so far as diplomacy, external affairs is concerned, firstly, you got a minister like Sushma Swaraj who has got, impeccable track record on delivering whatever assignment is given to her. And she has been exceptional during the SAARC, interaction with SAARC head of states and also the Chinese foreign minister's visit. See, all our neighbors are looking at India in a entirely different kind of perspective. See, earlier the UPA government somehow, nobody was taking us seriously. Now this time around, an invitation gets extended to SAARC nation, and everybody reciprocates. Everybody comes to us, and talks get conducted in a very cordial fashion, and also issues which are of importance to us are clearly, stated by our side in no uncertain terms. So everybody knows this, realizes this, that this is a government which means business. We are willing to embrace all our neighbors. We are willing to develop cordial relationship. We are willing to expand trade relationship with all our countries, including China. But we will not tolerate things which which have been clear bone of contention between various relationship with our neighbors. So that is there. And there are a lot of other things also which are there in this address. We will discuss over the course of conversation. Like there are things like first time we have come out with a policy wherein we will be scientifically identifying non-cultivable land for its strategic development. See, this will be a clear diversion from the earlier practice of using arable land for urbanization, which has done a lot of harm to us in terms of deforestation and everything. Similarly, we are focusing. See, governance was there with NDA government time also. It got extended during UPS time. This time around, we are focusing on implementing e-governance right down to the panchayat level. So that's the difference. The scale and the comprehensiveness of the ideas, implementation of those ideas is simply phenomenal, and that is where a clear change is going to come out.
Right. If we just get in Mr. Kanhaiya Bhilari as well, Mr. Bhilari, what are your views on what the discussion is going on? Do you feel that there is more than what meets the eye in terms of the President's address? Do you feel that it was only a mere statement given out by the government and that was read out by the President? Was there an individuality you felt that President Pranab Mukherjee brought to it vis-a-vis what we saw in the earlier presidential address to the both houses of Parliament? Mr. Bhilari?
See, I feel this speech is, this speech, I think is Modi Chalisa, not more than that. It is very shocking that the speech does not have mention of socialist and secular words, which is in the preamble of our constitution.
Right.
Mr. Narendra Modi is here several times saying that constitution is our dharma granth, and the mention of dharma granth is missing. What is it? It is the speech, for me, I think is prepared to strengthen the hands of the CEO, that is Mr. Modi. And this is the irony. It was Pranab Mukherjee irony that he mentioned my government 65 times, whereas when Vajpayee came into power in 99, at that time that president mentioned my government only twice. So he was made to mention my government 65 times. So I am of the observation that this is the speech is compilation of the speeches Mr. Modi made during his electioneering in the country.
Very interesting. I was waiting for somebody to point that out. Mr. Singh, would you like to take this comment forward? Would you agree with him?
To begin with, I don't think why should somebody read preamble of the Constitution when his president is addressing joint session of Parliament. I think that's totally unwarranted. If at all somebody has to read out Constitution, there are places and occasions where somebody has to read out. Secondly, 65 times my government. I think there are a whole lot of 70 paragraphs or something, out of which 65 times Kanhaiya Bhilari may have counted those, but I don't think these are 65 times. But that's possible, that's there. My government, the president is head of state. Don't forget, president is head of state. When he says my government, he means my government. After all, this is government for the people and elected government is there. President is there as head of state, so nothing wrong about that. Yes, somebody may have objection about whether it is Modi Chalisa or who's ever Chalisa, but fact remains that this mandate is for Modi. And therefore, I fully agree that there is other way. I had also written this reads like Modi's vision statement.
Yes.
And this is, of course, so many things have been compiled, but I think this is slightly this criticism that this reads like Modi Chalisa, I think that is slightly
Exaggerated.
harsher on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Sharma?
Well, I call it a collage of his speeches. I would not call it, I'll desist from calling it a vision because, it is not something, which is going to sustain very long in history. To me, as a journalist, it's important as a reference point. This statement has been made in Parliament. It becomes part of the institutional memory of my Parliament. As Sanjay rightly points out, that the President is the head of the state. And the state comprises our Parliament and the President. State is permanent. Governments come and go. And tomorrow the same President heading the same state may be reading out a policy statement of another government. So there is no irony there. I see no irony there at all, because this is the way we have, this is the architecture of the Indian state, and we have to respect that. There are a number of presidents who have disagreed with governments, but who have read out this statement in the joint sitting. The only time they have the freedom to have their own take, if my memory serves me right, is the Republic Day address. They can. They make their statements and they say things of their own. Like the previous Republic Day address, the President gave a call for a stable government. And the Prime Minister was conscious enough to repeat that,
yes,
at the first instance available to him. So I am not at all surprised that 65 or 165 or 600 times, every single word written there belonged to the government of the President.
But just to take...
this is a bit of a
I
churlish...
understand. Just to take forward from what Mr. Bhilari is also trying to say, that we saw in President Pratibha Patil's speech in the UPA 2 regime that they actually said that the government will ensure a growth process which will be accelerated, and not only that, it will be socially and regionally more inclusive and equitable. These are words, key words which were completely missing from this address.
So that is where the government came under criticism as well. Because if you remember, it was pointed out in Parliament that the speech, the speech gives you an impression as if the world starts with me. And then somebody quoted Charles XVI to say, after me the deluge. So I think that, you must, the beauty of Indian Parliament, which is bicameral, and is that you get to hear so many voices. And once you have paid adequate attention to what the government has said, and once you have paid adequate attention to what the opposition has said, one thing which has been made very clear in the course of the discussion on this presidential address is that anybody who thinks that there is no opposition left is sadly mistaken. Because the best speeches came from the opposition side.
Right.
And that is how it should be. It is the opposition which makes the government better. The more robust the opposition, the better the governance by the government. So I think that this is not the time to take partisan positions. This is not the time to pick holes in what the government has said. This document has to be preserved for posterity, so that 1 year down the line, we can ask this government, where do you stand vis-a-vis these promises to the people of this country.
Right. Mr. Bhilari, would you like to take this further, this conversation with your points?
Yeah, another thing I'm missing in the speech is governance and creation of job. The youth have voted Mr. Modi thinking they would be going into the heaven after he becomes the Prime Minister. Now he is the Prime Minister, but his speech does not have any concrete, mention that how they will create the jobs for crores of the unemployed youth. And on the governance, it is not very clear. So this speech is, I think, inadequate. It does not,
Right. I think we have an audio problem with Mr. Bhilari's connection. I'll just bring in Mr. Sanjeev Singh. Would you like to...
saying, it is only the competition.
Right. Mr. Sanjeev, would you like to give a retort to what Mr. Bellari is the concerns that he's raising?
See, I'll address the issues raised by him. Number one, when we say first right to resources would be of poor, isn't it socialism? So, if somebody says socialism is missing from this speech, I do not agree. Similarly, we are talking about health assurance for everybody. We are talking about, our poor farmers. We are talking about crop insurance scheme for them. All this is part of, traditionally called socialist, policies. Similarly, he mentioned about job creation. We have mentioned that we are going to focus on labor-intensive manufacturing. That is with a specific focus on increasing employment. Similarly, we are going to convert employment exchanges into skill development and training center, again with a focus to increasing employment. We have said we are going to increase tourism with again a specific focus on creating job opportunities. Just look at the kind of scope which is there. If we go ahead and promote, religious tourism, the spiritual tourism, there are at least 50 spots which, if properly developed, are going to create employment and also everything. And lastly, I remember Ghalib's share for all our critics. नुक्स निकालेंगे, थोड़ा सा इसको मॉडिफाई किया है, नुक्स निकालेंगे, गर्चे मतलब कुछ ना हो, हम तो क्रिटिक हैं तुम्हारे काम के।
अच्छा है, लेकिन मैं समझता हूँ कि मैं ये समय अब आ गया है कि मनोज कुमार की फिल्मों से इवॉल्व कर सत्यजीत रे की फिल्मों के ऊपर नज़र डाली जाए और जो यथार्थ है ज़मीन का भारत का, उसके लिए कोई उपाय ढूंढे जाएं। You see, this is all very well said and very well done. He has pointed out the first right to resources of the poor. This was coined when the government of the UPA said first right of resources on the minorities have the first right on resources. And there is nothing concrete in this book, in this speech on the minorities, except that they will be treated equally and everything will be done for them. I think personally, and their minister, I respect her greatly, Najma-ji, said that the Muslims aren't a minority. Yes, indeed, you can call them the second largest majority in this country. I may go long. They may be the second largest majority in this country because they constitute 70% of the minority population we have in this country. But their challenges are rooted in the assertive majoritarianism that we are seeing in this country. We have to understand that numbers can be tyrannical at times, and that sensitivity we have to see from this government. I would again repeat that this country does not need a strong prime minister. This country needs a decisive and a sensitive prime minister, which Mr. Modi should try and be, rather than being a strong prime minister. Because strength means what? Strength has many connotations. Decisiveness has no other connotation. And it is being sensitive and being decisive means what? Mr. Narendra Modi was a controversial figure. He was a divisive figure. Many of us have not voted for him. But he must remember that he is our Prime Minister as well today. So he has to listen to us. He has to be sensitive to criticism. He has to be receptive to criticism. And he should evolve. His policy should not be, devised unilaterally. It should be temporized with the inputs that he gets from all directions.
Mr. Singh, like Mr. Sharma has pointed out, it was interesting, of course, to see the opposition, also the left parties, actually, ripping in through the speech and the address by the president.
See, after all, 2-3 days in parliament are given for this purpose only.
Yes.
So that opposition parties have their say. You see, nobody actually opposes, moves against the motion. They support the motion till such time they intend to make the government fall, which is not the case. So they actually oppose, they pick holes in address to Thanksgiving motion to the presidential address, and therefore 2 days in this case have been allocated.
They can also move amendments to the motion.
Yeah, they can also move amendments to the motion, but they don't actually oppose this thing, which has a different connotation. So the idea for that is to bring diversity of opinions and criticism.
And a healthy debate.
Yeah, a healthy debate, so that popular will is reflected through parliament. After all, it's only the majority which is there in the government. Besides the majority treasury benches, there are also other people sitting on opposition benches or people who are not aligned with either treasury benches or strictly they want to be part with the main opposition party. So that is the position out there in parliament. Therefore, you listen to different voices, which is healthy and good for the democracy. After democracy means that. Part B, the address definitely was a good address, no doubts about that. Perhaps each and every address that is made in the beginning, that gives rise to new hopes to the people who have voted or not voted for that particular government of the day. Then test lies in implementation of these policies. Here, like Congress is saying that they have lifted several of our policies and
copied it, right?
Which is fine, not bad. What is bad about that? If there is something good of the Congress regime, why should this government not pick up those things and paraphrase or make repackage and make that look better? If they are doing so, that is well and fine. The test lies in its implementation, as to how they are implementing it, how they are proceeding ahead with this har khet ko pani and har haath ko hunar. These slogans are actually very nice slogan. The actual test will lie in implementation. Like Modi, for instance, yesterday he abolished some cabinet committees, and before that GM and EGM. That is also part of governance.
Exactly.
Which was said there, minimum government, maximum governance. As we proceed ahead, these are basic initial days when Modi is seen to be working hard. His ministers are seen to be working hard, or Modi is making them work hard. So what's the harm in that?
Right. One final comment from Mr. Sanjeev Singh. Do you then still feel hopeful that the entire agenda or the President's address will actually be implemented point by point in a more effective manner?
We will be very decisive in this. I respect Vinodji a lot, and since you mentioned about decisiveness, voters of this nation have been very decisive. They have given us a decisive mandate, and we are going to respect that. And another thing, we welcome all kinds of criticism. पुरानी कहावत है, निंदक नेड़े राखी आंगड़ी कुटी मधाई, क्योंकि निंदक ही आपको बताता है कि साहब आप कहाँ err कर रहे हैं, कहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम है, कहाँ कमी रह गई. So we are going to be very decisive on implementation. The very fact that President's address has reflected almost everything which we have promised in our election manifesto is a clear commitment towards that.
Right. Mr. Bhilari, final comment before we take this conversation online?
The style of functioning of Mr. Narendra Modi make me or the people believe that he is behaving in an autocratic manner. He thinks himself not, first among the equals. He is giving message that all the ministers and workers should treat him as boss. This is very unfortunate for the nation, and he should amend this attitude in him.
Right. On that note, I will take this conversation on our Twitter handle. Do put in your views and comments, and we want to know, what do you think about the presidential address? Did we see a different side to President Pranab Mukherjee? Will this government, the real test will lie in trying to be a sensitive and a decisive government, to not just raise hopes but make sure that they can implement these kind of decisions that they have announced, the promises they've made? Put in your views and audio comments on our website indiapostlive.com and our Twitter handle @IndiaPostLive. I'd like to thank all our guests, Mr. Sanjay Singh, Mr. Vinod Sharma, Mr. Sanjeev Singh from Lucknow representing the BJP voice, and Mr. Kanhaiya Bhilari raising concerns about Narendra Modi-led government's style of functioning. In the days ahead, a true litmus test. We'll have to wait and see, and a healthy opposition is what we are told seems to be the call of the day for most of our panelists. So do you think we have a healthy opposition, and will we see more kind of healthy debates and interesting voices coming from the opposition as well in the days ahead as the parliament session continues? Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more interesting conversations on indiapostlive.com. Goodbye.